Bienvenidos a todos. Right? Estamos para lo internacional. That's the only other language I speak, so I'm sorry.
It's all in Spanish.
Yeah. No sabían esto, no? Wonderful. We're going to get started here. My name is Alex Corey. I'm from ReFed, and we have a really special presentation for you today. I'm just about to announce our moderator, but prior to my work here at ReFed, I actually worked 10 years in the international space. It is an incredible opportunity, as I'm sure many of you know, who get to work cross-border to learn from others, share what we know here in the US with other countries, individuals, take what they have developed and bring those best practices here to the US. And so from this conversation today, I hope we have that same opportunity to learn from, again, this is my second panel of all women. Coincidence? Yeah, let's call it a coincidence, right? But no, our moderator here who's going to introduce the rest of the panelists is Hana Uman. She is the program officer at the Posner Foundation of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. She has many years of experience and leadership in the nonprofit food systems sector. She's been director of strategic volunteer programs at Hunger Free America, and she's been the program director for special programs and projects at 412 Food Rescue. She's also worked in community relations and corporate philanthropy at Duquesne, if I pronounce Duquesne. Ooh, it's QUE. It's complicated for me. Did I tell you I speak Spanish? Focus on that. But in addition to that, she's also been recognized by Waste 360 as a 40 under 40, and she's received an award for Who's Next in Food from Incline. But also beyond all that, she's just a great individual. She's a light of positivity, and I'm really excited for the conversation you're about to listen to. So please enjoy.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Alex. Can everyone hear me? Hi, good morning. So I'm Hana Uman. I'm program officer at the Posner Foundation. I'm thrilled to be here. I was actually at the first ReFed Summit at the Harvard Food Law and Policy Clinic in 2016. So from that to being over 700 people and being up on this stage with this really amazing group of women is kind of emotional. So just really happy to be here. We're gonna do something a little unconventional to get us started. So some folks know I'm a trained yoga teacher, and I think it's really important for all of us to make sure that we're checking in with our bodies when we've been sitting and standing and talking for the past 3 days. So we're just gonna do a short little stretch exercise. Only if you want, you don't have to participate. But if you'd humor me, so wherever you are in your seat, you're just gonna figure out where your feet are on the ground. Or if you're standing, so we're gonna check in with our feet. Okay. And we're gonna begin. We're just all gonna take a collective breath in and out. So breathing in through our nose. Breathing out through your mouth. Gonna do it 2 more times. Breathing in. And out. 1 more time. Breathing in. Breathing out. And then we're gonna take one arm, maybe your right arm, so that we're all not hitting each other. You're gonna lift it up, and then you're just gonna stretch a little bit to the side. Oh, that's great. Okay, and then back down, other side, lift it up, over. This is beautiful. We're making community with our neighbors. Okay, we're pulling it down. Okay, and then one of my favorite stretches, and again, watch out for your neighbors. You're just gonna shake it all out. If you want, shake your feet, shake your hands, shake. And, okay, how's everyone feeling? Thank you. You all looked wonderful. That was really beautiful. Okay, so we're gonna get into our panel. I'm so excited to have here with me 3 grantees from the Posner Foundation's Food Waste Solutions cohort. So I'll give a little bit of background of what that process was like, and then really I'm gonna turn this over to them and let them speak. So the Posner Foundation, we're a family foundation based in Pittsburgh, but we actually fund all over the world. And we have 5 focus areas, one of which is environment. So a number of years ago, I'm going to call her out, the queen, Ida Posner, who is such a champion for food waste, brought the idea to the foundation and really wanted to do more in food waste. There was obviously, we all know the ReFed report, there was clear opportunities for philanthropic capital to be injected into the food waste space. So the Posner Foundation did its first ever open RFP to see what opportunities are out there in the food waste space, specifically looking at changing consumer behaviors, because again, back to the ReFed report, there was clear data that that was an area that really needed philanthropic capital. So from that RFP, there was well over 100 submissions, and from that, we got 13 projects all over the world, and we're so excited to have actually brought 3 folks here today from that cohort who we're continuing to work with on changing consumer behaviors. So I'm so excited to have with me today Daniela Guerrero from Village Capital. She is the manager of the Latin America program. We also have, Laura, I don't know if I can pronounce your name correctly, Laura Schun. I did it. Laura Schun from Busara, who is an associate there, and they do work in Sub-Saharan Africa. And last but certainly not least, Gabriella Rosato, who is the manager of food systems partnerships at Red Bomex, which is the Mexican Food Banking Network. So with that, yes. And you're gonna be clapping even more after you hear about all the amazing work that they're doing. So I'm going to first turn it over to Danny, and then we're gonna go Laura and Gabby. So Danny, why don't you get started?
Thank you, Hannah. So happy to be here. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to tell you just really quickly. You can read this on your own. I'm not going to recite that to you. But about Village Capital, we are an organization that's basically focused on supporting impact startups that are at their earliest stages to make sure that they have the best chances of survival, but also of scaling their impact throughout different markets. By now, we've been operating since 2009, specifically in Latin American office. We've been working since 2015. Worldwide, we have supported around 1,600 entrepreneurs, around 70 countries, and 150 acceleration programs that are focused in investment readiness. So really happy to be here, and glad to tell you a little bit more. Should I just go ahead? Cool. So in Village Capital, one of our main aims is to make sure that these startups have all of the resources they need in order to continue their growth, specifically in connections, capital, and also knowledge. We think that there's a huge gap between what an entrepreneur is, let's say, born knowing and what they need to know in order to scale their impact. And we want to make sure that we give them all of those tools and resources to do that. So our programs are basically focused on using different tools. Some of those tools we have created throughout the years in order to give them the ability to do so. So one of our main tools, which is the Abaca platform, you can look that up as abaca.app, is basically a tool that they can use to analyze their business throughout 8 business category and 9 growth levels. This is so that we can remove ambiguity from this process and to make sure that they have everything they need in order to grow their business in a more structured and intentional way. And so we wanted to transfer all that knowledge to food waste specific startups that are able to grow or rather to impact different problems that we have around the world, specifically in Latin America. So for those, to give a little context on Latin America specifically, around 11.6% of all the food that is grown in Latin America goes to waste. That's a little bit over $150 billion a year that we have on waste. But at the same time, we're one of the most prosperous regions in the world in terms of the resources we have and to grow that food, where we get around 33% of all global precipitation, and we have around the 40% of access to all of these sustainable resources in the world. So it's definitely not a region that needs to be in this position of wasting that much food, of having food insecurity, of having individuals that are hungry or that don't have the security of a healthy diet. It's not a need. It's something that we need to work on. It's something that we can definitely find solution to, and that's what our program aims to do, is to find solutions in the different stages of the supply chain to be able to get better results, get better at not wasting any food. And so through our program last year, hand in hand with the Posner Foundation, we supported 8 startups that were working in food waste specifically, reshaping consumer behaviors and also the access or reshaping the food that the consumer has access to. So a few examples, we were able to support ventures from 4 different countries around the Latin American region, working from everything from food traceability, making sure that the consumer knows where the food that they're consuming is coming from, that the farmers are able to certify their food as organic or as non-GMO or anything that will give them a higher income and more security in their work. From the supply chain and getting people to understand the importance of the cold chain that we have and making that as efficient and as low in carbon emissions as possible, to getting to the consumers and actually giving them the marketplace where they can consume food that is fresh and directly from farms and from the fields. So that's something that we're working on expanding on this year. We want to make sure that we're as conscious as possible of the actual issues that we are facing in Latin America specifically, and how we can build that to be a more holistic solution and a solution that's connected to the rest of the world. So I'm gonna stop there because I'm pretty sure I'm over those 5 minutes that Hana gave me. And yeah, happy to take any questions and also talk a little bit more later.
Thank you. And yeah, thank you everybody for being here. So yeah, I work at Busara, and at Busara what we do is basically research and advisory on a range of different topics around like poverty alleviation in Sub-Saharan Africa, but also in different regions of the world. But today I'll talk to you about Kenya and Nigeria, where we have started in 2022 our project with the Posner Foundation. And so basically what we are trying to do is look at what we started by doing is looking at what is the food waste in Kenyan and Nigerian traditional markets, mainly because this is where consumers actually mainly shop, like not as much supermarkets, but traditional open air markets. And so our goal was to understand where was the waste at that level, and also how can we reduce it. And actually, I know that here I heard a lot of like the interventions being done around consumer behavior, but it's actually not something that people really invest or like work on in East Africa or Nigeria. And that is mainly because there's a lot of focus on the farmer side. So how can we train them to have better handling practices? Or at the storage level, can we invest in cold room storage or transport? And that makes sense because this is actually where most of the waste happens. But at the same time, if you don't change also at the consumer level, then you will never have the demand, and then the farmers will not be willing to also change their practices because people will not buy. So we started looking at fruits and vegetables, and more specifically, less visually appealing produce. And that is because, well, fruits and vegetables, as we know, have a very short shelf life and tend to perish very fast. And that is even more true for less visually appealing produce, right? Like people are actually not willing to buy it, and so they just automatically go to waste. When a vendor has some funny looking produce, they know it's away. And so what we found are mainly 3 things. Actually, people associate funny looking produce with being unhealthy and unsafe for consumption. We also found that actually people shop on a daily basis, so they don't have that same problem of buying too much fruits and vegetables and they go to waste. So there wasn't really a point on working on that aspect, but more working at the market point of sale. And then the other thing that we found also is that vendors also buy on a daily basis their produce because they want to display fresh produce that looks good to attract consumers. So to design the intervention, we decided to take a human-centered approach, and basically what we found is that what would work is a behavior change campaign working on informational messaging. So for example, gain-free messages, but also visual cues like notice this product and that it's as good as the normal product. So yeah, like the past few days, we've heard a lot of great things around food waste around the world, but actually very little is done in Sub-Saharan Africa. And that also comes from the fact that there's very little research on it that is available. Most of the research worldwide is actually focused in Western countries, in the US or in Europe and things like that. And so the interventions that are designed are also adapted to those contexts. And a lot of times when you're working on intervention, you know that especially behavior change, like you know that the context, the norms, and the habits are really important. So yeah, that's kind of what we're trying to do here. Do more research, share more possibilities for intervention, what can work in those contexts and what cannot. So yeah, happy to talk more on it later. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for this kind invitation. Can I have that control? Thank you. Yeah, thank you. So I am Gabriella Rosato. I'm the National Manager for Food System Partnership at the Mexican Food Banking Network, and it's my first time at ReFed, so I'm so honored and thankful for this opportunity. Thank you so much. And it's such an honor to share our journey with you. I'm working at the Mexican Food Banking Network, and we are a national NGO with 30 years of experiences in recovering food at a national level, at a local level, all across the supply chain, from farmers to consumers. And for us, the food loss and waste issue was kind of new, but we felt that it totally makes sense for us to do both, to focus on recovering food and also on the prevention side. So since 2017, thanks to the support of other international organizations like RAP, like GFN, that we are members of the Global Food Banking Network, we have been thinking how in Mexico we can develop these strategies to also tackle food losses and waste issue. And we wanted to do it in the way that we know we can do things, so all across the supply chain. We want to collaborate with our donors, that are manufacturers, retailers, hotels and restaurants, and also consumers. So in 2021, we launched the voluntary agreement that we called Pacto por la Comida. And these are initiatives at a national and international level to tackle food losses and waste and collaborate with companies at a local level. And also, we resume it in basically 3 pillars. We do measurement on the ground, on site, with the companies that decide to understand more about their production and distribution processes and look at the hotspots. So what we want to understand is where these hotspots are and how we can convert them into an opportunity to recover food. So we do both. Our food banks work locally, and we do the technical part at the beginning of these supply chain. And also, since last year, thanks to Posner Foundation, we have been designing a national communication strategy that is supported also by a national consumers behavior survey. And we have been collecting interesting information about consumers. It was something totally new to us, but we knew that we had to raise more awareness. As I said before, food losses and waste in Mexico, it's a very new issue. It's not perceived as a global issue or a national issue, so people tend to waste food wherever they are, at household level, at corporate level, at the office level. So at first, we should begin from the impact of food loss and waste at environmental level, economical level, and social level. Of course, as a food banking network, our focus is on relief hunger, but we understand that if we do not tackle food loss and waste, we are increasing hunger and a more unequal distribution of food that is, of course, accessible in our country. If you remember, 2 days ago, my CEO was here in the same room delivering a presentation about what we do. And we know that in our country every year, 30 millions of tons of food suitable for human consumption is going to waste. So there is enough food to relieve hunger in our country. And in this case, thanks to Pacto por la Comida and this national awareness campaign that is called En México la comida no se tira, we had the opportunity to partners with some of the companies that you see there. Walmart is one of them, Walmart Mexico, Nestle, and of course we have interesting collaboration with CEC and other national companies that embrace the messages that we want to send, that throwing food is not an option, of course, and these can prevent the effect on the environment, on the economical side, and on the social aspects, of course. So we keep doing that. This year we are focusing on household level waste measurement. We're going to tackle into specific areas of the country and measure food loss and waste within a frame of 3 weeks, house by house. It sounds like challenging, but we know we can do that, and this is like the start of pushing forward the topic of food loss and waste at a national level. And we have been hearing a lot of amazing ideas in these 3 days. We have been changing a lot of point of view, and we want to bring home so much new ideas that other organizations are developing in other corners of the globe. So, and of course, we can share what we have learned in these 3 years of our volunteer agreement and all the work that we have done with our local food banks. And we are very, very thankful that we can showcase what we have learned so far. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everyone. And Gabby, you actually led me into a great question, which is, being here, I think this is all of your first times here at the ReFed Summit. What are the things that you do want to take back and implement, with your projects, or what are you think are lessons, based on what you've heard that you think folks can learn from you here today? And this is for all of you.
May I start?
Whoever wants to start.
Thank you. Thank you, Hannah. This is an amazing question. We have learned so much in such a short time, and I think the key, and one of the things that we are bringing back home is keep working with consumers. Keep working with consumers, understanding more about consumers' behaviors and consumers' habits. That could be the key for us to raise awareness and make consumers closer to our causes as a food banking network and as an organization that is pushing these environmental topics. Thanks to the support that we have with companies, again, like Walmart, like Nestle, we think we have a privileged channel to communicate directly with consumers. And one thing we're going to add this year, besides keeping the work with the household level, is that we are going to develop a whole new asset of communication campaign for kids. We want to work with kids since 5 years old, so primary school kids, and talk to them about food loss and waste implication. So as soon as we began to talk to them, so they can bring that into their life and make it a habit and making a mindset for when they will be the future consumers or the future decision making, so they will also have this knowledge about food loss and waste since early ages. And this is something new, and this is something we really care a lot. And all that we can share, Mexico is such a diverse country, and it's a developing country, so we can share our experiences, for instance, with Turkey had a wonderful presentation, or the Netherlands, or Africa also. So I think we have a lot to learn, but we have also a lot to share with other countries, and we are more than happy to do that.
Thank you. Yeah, but yeah, definitely that part of learning from a lot of different places. And yeah, on Tuesday, it was so nice to see how there were so many different initiatives that are technically all in very different contexts, and context is a big word, right? But at the same time, you could always see a bit of a link between all. I think one thing that like I personally found really interesting is sort of the aspect of recovering, like redistributing, redirecting that food that actually is going to be wasted and like cannot be sold in like the traditional markets that like would usually be sold in. But how can you still find other ways, right? Like there are food banks, there are schools, like there are other alternatives, and like it doesn't necessarily needs to be sold in like the ways. So yeah, like I think that's a very cool aspect. And also, yeah, as you said, like school children, right? Like that's where you can actually most effectively do behavioral change in the long term. If you start early, right? Like cooking classes, and then they bring back home those things and like, and then, yeah, you kind of craft this for like the future generation, which is really cool, really interesting. So yeah, I think those are things that need to be put back in a different context, but can definitely be learned from, yeah.
I'm feeling like a refed kids track, like, yeah, like a summer camp.
Would love
Yeah.
that. Could it be for adults too? Because I'd love to join a summer camp. Okay, I agree with everything that's been said. Like, it's amazing to see so many different ideas and solutions come together and starting to make those links on how they can converge and be a movement instead of just different ideas on their own. I think for me, it's amazing to see all of this work being done with consumers, and one of the most surprising statistics for me that I don't work in the US, but rather in Latin America, is that 50% of the waste is at home or is created at home. When you take that stat back to the Latin America context, that goes down to 17%, which means that most food is not being wasted by consumers themselves, but rather by the lack of infrastructure. So it's really important for us to take these learnings and really understand that they are in a different context and that we need probably different solutions for a Latin American market. I think working with startups, one of our big concerns is that to make sure that they have enough funding to make their solutions scale and actually make an impact on the region that they're working in. Many times that means that the solutions are not only working in their own country, but rather working in a regional level, and sometimes scaling into the US and making sure that it's available in more than one market. And that means taking a holistic approach to the program and making sure that we understand that what is probably going to work in the US is not necessarily going to be working in another region. And we need to make the necessary adjustments to make that happen. We need money for that to happen, or not us, but these startups need money for that to happen. And I think investment is such a big part of that. We need to make sure that we're investing in the right solutions, but also that we're expecting the results that are logical for the region that they're working in. I think it's important for us to take the learnings, for me specifically, to take the learnings that I've had this week and really understand what the differences are, but also what we can learn from each other, and also what are the points in which we agree and we can work together to solve, start there, and then work our way back. So I think for us, it's been a lot about learning what this market can offer us, but also what we can take back home and make sure that we're doing in the best way possible.
Thank you so much, all. And Danny, I'm really glad that you brought the funding piece in. So, we're really glad to be a funder in this work. We know there's still so much more work to be done. I do want to mention, if folks aren't aware of the philanthropic roadmap on food loss and waste that was launched last year, I believe Dana mentioned it yesterday. Really great opportunities, and we were really glad that these three organizations were actually mentioned as scalable solutions. So with the point about funding, so previously, a lot of the work that you all have done are with companies or big NGOs, or maybe not traditional like US philanthropy. So I'm interested to hear just like, what was that experience like? What are some tips and tricks maybe that you can provide to any of our nonprofits in the room to find interesting ways to get outside of their traditional, funders and find new philanthropic opportunities?
So I think it's been really refreshing to work with philanthropy recently. We are more used to corporate foundations that are bigger and a little more structured, or the traditional venture capital, which is much more restrictive, not because they don't want to or because they want to be, but because they have very specific thesis statements that they have to follow, and they have LPs to answer to and things like that, which means that they have a really strict line that they have to follow, which is not necessarily the case for philanthropy. Philanthropy usually has an end goal that they want to get to instead of like really specific rules on how to get there, and we have a lot of freedom in the way that we invest that money. And this is not a paid commercial, but I will say that I do encourage everyone to think about how we can use that philanthropic capital in the private sector or invest it in a way that the private sector benefits, not because of the traditional reasons, but rather because we have seen in Village Capital that the way to scale impact is through making ventures sustainable. If they are economically sustainable, they will be able to scale that impact that they're working towards. Of course, we only work with ventures that have impact in their core of the venture, not as a side benefit to what they're doing to make business. So if you can support those ventures that have impact at their core and that they are intrinsically working towards this goal, they are able to work towards that in the private sector and complement everything that's been done in the public sector. And I think that's the way to move forward, is making sure that those two things are hand in hand and that we can work together towards a bigger goal. I think one of the things that we've heard so far in the work that we're doing this year is that interconnection between systems is the key to, and the answer to everything. As you might have heard in those tote bags that everyone's carrying, by nature, change has to be a collective effort, and I think that's something that we're focusing a lot on, is making sure that we can connect everyone together and work hand in hand towards a bigger problem instead of everyone doing so from their point of view and sticking to a very restrictive area that maybe cannot be or won't provide the change we need as fast as we need it.
That was a sermon.
Yeah, like a bit from a different perspective, but same. I think like working with like the philanthropy space is like very interesting because they're, as you said, right, like they're not necessarily as much focused on how you do things, what is going to be your process, but more like where are you reaching, which like is kind of great, because when you do like, when we do research and advisory, a lot of times like partners come to us and they're like, okay, we want to figure out an intervention and we want to implement it right away. And a lot of times the problem is, like I said earlier, right? Like there's not enough research. We don't have enough information about what we can do or what we cannot do, what could work or what won't work at all. And like a lot of times they really rush through like that formative research process, which kind of has a bit of a tricky impact then on like building the intervention and like doing through the implementation, just because if you're not sure enough of like what's happening, what are the habits of the people, what are their norms, like what are like the different things that they go through, then you risk of having something that is completely out of their need, like is completely out of something that is practical and effective. So yeah, like I think that's a great thing, like getting to spend more time on understanding, and more than that, being able to share it, right? Like that's also the problem when you work a bit more on the private side, then people are not as willing to share that information because it's private or confidential. But the problem is that we need to share. We need to like share the learning with grassroots organization, because otherwise, kind of that work, as you said earlier as well, right? Like if you don't all come together and share everything that you know, then you won't manage to get together to the impact that you want. So yeah, I think that's quickly, yeah.
Thank you for the question. And I mean, as an NGO, a national NGO, as the Mexican Food Banking Network, we have been working all of our life with private funds and corporate funds. So working with philanthropy has been a very refreshing, like new page on our journey, and it allows us to do things that we have never been able to do before. Once we have been approaching the food losses and waste issue, we face a huge and tremendous obstacle. The lack of data was huge, was enormous. There wasn't any data about food losses and waste in Mexico, And we were allowed to do that. We were allowed to generate data, to generate more information about data, to raise awareness. And this is something that is like a step forward from what we have done before. And that allows us to grow, to cooperate more, to like look beyond what we have done the last 30 years, and now sit here also. It's a huge opportunity and showcase internationally what we are doing in Mexico. And again, it's a pivoting point for us, also because our funders trust us. And this is a huge freedom that in other cases you don't have. Some of the funders or some of the corporate philanthropy or corporate funds just look like in a traditional way when they found you and they expect a specific result. So sometimes they do not give you like the freedom to operate or to do something new. But in this case, we are having the huge opportunity to like change the game and change the way we are doing things. And looking at the long-term like relationship, this give us like the confidence to understand more and to become those experts that our country is needing, especially in food loss and waste. So we are feeling privileged. We are feeling like so thankful for this opportunity. And we are feeling so proud of today being here and of course look beyond that and keep working on food loss and waste and keep working on recovering more food. And now we're looking at a shift. From a specifically social organization, we're shifting to a social environmental organization. So we are looking to other aspects that were considered before. So this is like the opportunity that we are having. If any one of you is interested in fund some projects, organization, let the organization do the work. Trust in the organization that you are funding and making it in a local context. One of the other like biggest issues that you should find funder that it's of course open to find globally, and this is not so like common in our case. As a Mexican organization, we struggle to find a like organization that would like to fund globally. So if you find that, keep it closer, and also on the other side, just trust your organization and allow them to work locally because they know the context, they know the stakeholders that are involved, they know the challenges and the opportunities that exist locally. So this is a great match. When a funder trusts their fundees, and this is the example, great things can happen beyond any expectation. So thank you so much.
Thank you. That wasn't planned, I swear. No, but really, thank you all. And something that I found was really a through line from what you all were sharing is that you're almost like entering landscapes where work really hadn't been done in the way that you're doing it before. In some ways, you're building something from scratch. So I'm interested to hear, you know, in the food loss and waste landscape, like where do you see your work in your context? What are your hopes and dreams? Like, you know, thinking 5 to 10 years now, where this work will be, you know, in the regions that you're working. Wow. Whoever wants to start.
Wow, that's a great question. Like, what would you want to be when you grow up, or where you see yourself like in 5 years? That's exactly, that's the question. I think from what we have learned in the 30 years of working in recovering sectors all across the supply chain, and now like entering the food loss and waste reduction part, I think that we position the Mexican Food Banking Network as a unique organization in the Mexican context, and also at global level. We are like the only food banking network that is leading a voluntary agreement on reducing food losses and waste at a global level, and we also are the first food banking network that is proposing carbon credit in the international markets. So I think we already stepped beyond, but we can go forward. We know to need to adapt. We know we must adapt to the change of the global markets, of the environmental issues, and without like losing the focuses on relief hungers. This is our main mission, but looking at all the strategies that can support our mission. We still want feed people first. This is the most important things to us and to our food bank in Mexico, but also looking at all the strategies that can support this mission. And of course, relieving hunger, we believe it's possible, but also we want to tackle food loss and waste and relieve stress from natural resources, supporting farmers, supporting communities locally. So I think we see in ourselves. I think I can give you like a balanced answer next year when we'll be all together here again. So, but the future is challenging, definitely, as an NGO. Our national context hasn't been like so easy to work with, but we have the support of global and international organizations that recognize our work. So that is a huge support that we have. And so we keep working, of course, and we keep looking for more opportunities to strengthen our food banks locally, to have more partnerships at global level, and collaborate with other organizations that are out there. And we are very, very open to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. I think community ownership, right? Like, I think a lot of time when, I think different, but like, when you work with people, right, and you're like sort of designing intervention for them, and you're like sort of expecting them to like keep this going on for the long term. I think like one of the really tricky things is like when you don't design those with them and like sort of looking at very short-term effect, right? Like you do impact evaluation and you look at the effect over a year, but like what is it over 5-10 years? Are people still interested in that? Actually, did it work? Did it not? And it's, I think, yeah, like one of the biggest success for those projects is whether when you're gone, is it still working? And it's something that is really hard to like sort of measure just because it requires a lot of resources and a lot of time and even like people-wise, right? If people move on from an organization, it's harder like to track and all of those things. But yeah, I think that one of the things that really help is making sure that you're talking to people when you're sort of thinking through those things and involving them at sort of every step of the way. And also once you roll out those different things, making sure that they're part of the communication. And if nothing happens, then let them know why nothing happened. Don't just let people in the community being like, well, what happened to those people? Yeah. So yeah, I think, yeah, now I'll give it.
So glad I was last in this question. I had time to think. And I think for us, it may be really redundant, and I'm sorry if it is, in the third day of this conference to come back and ask the question, why is wasting food so bad? Why is food waste such an important issue to tackle? And I think for us, if we get our way, we will get people questioning that, because it comes from questioning yourself and into an individual level and really understanding why is it's so important to you to stop wasting food. That makes people found businesses that actually take this into consideration. Nobody does this because it's the easy way to make money. Nobody does it because it's the easiest way to work or the easiest problem to solve. It's actually one of the hardest. So really understanding why you personally consider food waste so important that it has to be an issue that you are delving yourself into, that really makes people and foundations and organizations and corporations and startups solve the problem that we need solved, right? It's really important for us to question that and really understand that at a personal level so that we can bring it into an organizational level and really understand what we can do to help. How can we help from our experience? How is my experience valuable to the problem that we're trying to solve? So for us, it's really bringing that to the forefront of the discussion and really understanding that and asking the silly questions, asking the basic questions so that we can get that into a more deeper conversation and making sure that we're having those important talks that we need to have in order to solve this problem. So for us, it's really understanding why we do it and why we are best positioned to do it that really will eventually get people to solve this problem together. And I think that's one of the main things that we focus on in our acceleration programs is hearing the origin stories of the founders, understanding why they are solving the problem, why they consider it important, and you'd be surprised at the variety of answers that we get. It's not as obvious as we like to think. So I think continuing to ask those difficult questions and getting to a point where everyone is asking the same question is, for us, the most important thing that we can have.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. So we are about at time for questions from the audience. So I have more questions that I can ask, but if you have a question, I would encourage you to be brave and come up to the microphone. Great. Go ahead, hi.
Hello, good morning. I am Alcione from Connecting Food Brazil. Thank you. We know that working with consumer behavior is something that it's a more medium to long term to have results. Yeah, we are talking about behaviors and cultures and everything that's related with more consciousness than, more practical ways. For the other side, when we have philanthropy or venture philanthropy or all these new ways of putting money on business and on these social initiatives, they always usually ask for a more short-term results. So we have this challenge. Yeah, we are working in one side something is a more medium long term, and the other side we need to report, we need to monitoring. I think Kabi it's part of her daily basis. Yeah, and so how to balance short-term results with a medium and long-term transformation?
I can get us started. Obrigada. But I think we face this every day. Like it's definitely, and that's one of the things that if you leave this conference from anything from me is that context matters. The results that we can expect from a market like the US or a market like Europe is not the same result that we can expect from a market like Latin America, which is still lacking a lot of infrastructure. It's not necessarily that we can give a solution that is going to end the problem in the next 10 years. Probably in the next 10 years, what we're gonna have is more infrastructure that will allow us to ask the questions that maybe are being asked right now in the US. So I think for us, managing expectations is one of the biggest things that we teach our startups, is to make sure that they are promising what they can promise. Entering any conversation, not only at the end of that conversation, is understanding that from the beginning, those startups are not going to be able to promise the same thing that maybe a startup in a more developed market would be able to, but also teaching investors to also have that mentality, to really understand that if you are going to invest in a market such as Latin America, and Brazil is one of the most developed ones in Latin America, if you are going to invest your money and your time in a region like that, know that you are not going to have the same results as the ones that you're having now. But it's kind of like investing in Amazon 20 years back. Like you are getting on the ground floor of what is probably one of the most powerful regions in terms of agriculture and food in general. So definitely, for us, is gauging expectations and making sure that we are being very conscious on the way that we present the information, because the how matters just as much as the why, for me, is the most important thing.
I don't have much more to add than like the expectation part, right? Like it's so hard. You're just like, oh, we want to see that and that must happen. And you're like, okay, but like actually there's no way that we can measure this over a year, right? And there's no way for us to promise that this will last on the long term. So yeah, I think managing expectation and be like, okay, like if you actually want to be sure that you are having the impact that you wish to have, then make sure that this works long term. Or if you don't want to commit, then like try to get other organizations on the grassroots that can maybe self-sustain this on themselves, take this, share this with them. But yeah, I think that apart from this, it's such a tough, tricky situation. Like.
Thank you. Hi, Alcione. You're so right. You're so right. And I understand I understand what you're saying, because sometimes you work with a social context that it moves so slow compared to the expectation of your funder, and you are in the middle. You are in the middle of this equation, and you have to try to bring your funder to understand your local context. If your funder is from outside Brazil, that should be like the first step, I think, to make your funder aware of what you are facing at a local context. And of course, I mean, social behavior changes take a lot of time. So that could be a strategy, like in perspective, to make your funder supporting you not just 1 year, but year 2, year 3, and so on, because it can take also 3 years or 5 to do that. And also looking for partnerships at local level that can boost your organization to support and reach your goals as fast as possible. But yes, it's a struggle that we live every day as NGOs or organizations, especially in South America or Central or North America. But this is your role. Bring your funder to your local context, and then bring a global conversation into your local context, and make your partners and stakeholders locally as your social organization aware that they can be part of this global conversation, and then you keep the balance. I don't know if that was helpful.
Maybe in the case of Brazil, we can start with a national trip to the beaches, the Amazon, and so on.
Yeah, that can help.
Yeah, I'd be happy to come on that if you need that. But I think that just to add to that, and I appreciate that question, I think, it's also the role of philanthropy to to have more trust. There's a lot of discussion now about trust-based philanthropy, but there is a lot of value in that, like, I am a white woman from Reston, Virginia. I don't know the context that these folks work in, so I really think that's important. Our foundation, we're a spend-down foundation, so we're gonna sunset the foundation by 2040, and that makes us think really differently about the way that we're supporting partners, and I feel really privileged in that, but I've also worked in the corporate philanthropy side that thinks very differently. So I think it's also the role of philanthropy to talk about the way that we're doing things and trying to do things differently, and to hopefully get our peers to join in on that. Okay, I think we have time for one more question.
Hi, James Hart, Food Rescue US, and my question is actually really just about funding access, and it's always refreshing to see folks like yourselves who have assembled some really potent collaborations of funders, corporate funding, private and foundation funding. This is sort of a back to basics question, but what practices have you all found to be most effective at getting in the room with the funders? In my experience, that's all, like, get me in the room, I can make stuff happen, but that's the hardest part. Funders can be evasive, would be the polite way I'd put it. So I'm just curious, like, for the four of you, I would love to hear some of the practices that have worked really well, how you've built and opened the door to some of those relationships, and then what you found successful in maintaining those relationships over time.
One thing I would plug is getting connected with the Food Waste Funders Circle if you aren't already. You, as a nonprofit organization, can submit a project with a budget, with information, and that goes out to a wide list of funders. I've, and found that to be a really helpful resource, so I do want to plug that.
I think related to what Hannah's saying, like, knowing the right people helps, but I think one of the things that we tell everyone that we help, like the startups that we work with, is how you communicate. The message that you're communicating matters, not only in substance, but also in the way that you're communicating that message. I think many times we think we know what the most valuable part of our solution is, but we may need to question that again or even change it every time that we're having a different conversation, because the way that we think of a problem may not be the same way that the one that we're looking for funding from thinks about it. So going back to what I was saying about like why food waste matters, if you ask someone, they may tell you because food insecurity is one of the greatest issues that we have. Another person may be able to tell you that it matters because of the health of and nutrition, that aspect that can come with better access to food or better food in general. And like that, I can keep going on forever about the different things that we've heard, but I think understanding what they get out of it is just as important as how you are communicating that, and aligning those two things is important. And then the second thing that we always say is, ask for advice, you'll get money. Ask for money, you'll get advice. So I think really understanding that people can help you in other ways that's not funding. Ultimately, that's the most necessary thing, but people can give you different help that's not necessarily the funding that you're needing, and through that help, you can get to the right person. So asking for an introduction, asking for resources, asking for advice, you can get further than you would imagine, I think.
All right, like 30 seconds. Anyone else?
Just thank you for the question. Just, I mean, going back to basics like trust and building this communication with your funders, like the basics, of course. Don't compromise or don't promise anything that you can achieve. I mean, don't like over push your capacities if you don't really have that like possibility to achieve that. And also, yeah, keep your funder closer to your community, closer to your zones of interest or operation, and keep the funder like on the ground with you, so you can experience what you're facing like in your day-by-day activities. But yeah, most important is trust and communication. Like, be transparent also. Be transparent anytime something happens or something's not going as planned. And yeah, be very honest and transparent. And also, I mean, set your ambition high, but your expectation must be grounded. I mean, let your funder see your ambition in 3 or 5 years, but you are going like step by step. Every steps count. So, and be honest on that, and be transparent on that, and design and build together the project that you would like to accomplish together.
Great. So I just want to, like, please, huge round of applause. We're so happy. Thank you all for being here to listen to these amazing women who traveled from other areas. We also even want to shout out one of Laura's colleagues, Fadila, who is in Nigeria, was not granted a visa. So it is challenging to get here, so we just want to name that. And thank you all, and enjoy the rest of your summit.